We are unfair and unfair. We are black magicians. Black arts we make in the black labs of the heart. The fair are fair and the deathly white. The day will not save them, and we own the night. Before the Black Arts Movement during World War I, many African Americans began to migrate out of the South to northern cities such as New York and Chicago. Migration triggered the recognition of the black community because it allowed African Americans to spread their culture. Henry Johnson and Nadim Roberts, as a pastime and as a way to celebrate, them and their black fellow soldiers would play jazz. According to Richard Worth, the mainstream media began respecting African Americans after Henry Johnson and Nadim Roberts' brave action occurred when risking their lives for their fellow soldiers against the enemy in Germany. After the war, the 396th Infantry Regiment arrived at Harlem, New York, to a victory parade where people danced and sang to jazz music. Results of the music and showcasing of African American culture soon became known as the Harlem Renaissance. The Black Arts Movement allowed the black community to stand up for themselves through an art form against the fact that all attention went to mainstream white media. Although the Black Arts Movement did not have an immediate effect on communities and mainstream media, when we look at it along with the Black Power movement, which was happening around the same time, we can see how influential it was on communities with the fact that more black owned businesses emerged and more African Americans were portrayed in mainstream media. The movement spanned from 1965 to 1967. The Black Arts Movement is a branch of the Black Power movement that allowed black artists to create works for other African Americans so that they would not have to surrender their artistic views to the standards of whites. Here's what Rebecca Zorak, an art historian at the University of Chicago, has to say about it.
I would define it as the movement of um, a kind of politicized movement of African American artists in a lot of different media that started in the mid to late 1960s, and some people would say that it goes only until like the mid 1970s or a little bit further, and others would say that it's still going on. So because it's very much about black identity, about claiming the term black along with black power, black liberation, black is beautiful. Of course, it's often been thought of as more a movement of poetry and performing arts, of theater, music, and poetry, than of the visual arts. It was a movement by and for by African American artists for the African American community. Not really interested in mainstream approbation. Not interested in kind of what white people thought or other people thought about their work, but really focusing on like black art for black people.
In the quote presented earlier by Leroy Jones, we see the first instance of the term black arts being used, and incoincidentally, it's being used by the father of the black arts movement. Leroy Jones was a poet and publisher from Harlem who founded the Totem Press. When Malcolm X, a black Muslim activist, was assassinated in 1965, it caused almost everyone in the black community to grieve. His death caused Leroy Jones, who was already an activist for Black Power and a leader in his community, stepped forward even more so to follow in Malcolm's footsteps. He converted to Islam and changed his name to Amiri Baraka. The same year Malcolm was assassinated, Amiri founded the Black Arts Repertory School and Theater. According to Neal, through this establishment, he was able to encourage many black students and viewers to elevate their voices through poetry and other modes of art.
Was really a very key figure in the Black Arts movement nationally. Um, a lot of his rhetoric and his work was really revolutionary and aggressive.
Unfortunately, the theater was quickly shut down by New York officials in fear of black creativity and it gaining too much popularity, thus starting the Black Arts Movement. Baraka's efforts clearly did not go unnoticed. Since the theater closed, students and performers took it to the streets of Harlem. They performed poetry, music, and theater pieces. Black art groups were formed on the East Coast in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., New York, etc. These groups would set up fairs, performances, and seminars for other African Americans that were interested in the movement or just art itself. During the same time was the Black Power movement, which encouraged many black owned businesses to emerge. Among these were many publishing houses that spread news of the black arts movement and pushed black artists into the spotlight. From the East Coast, the movement spread westward into the Midwest by word of mouth and through black owned publishing houses such as Negro Digest, Black World, and Dudley Randall's Broadside Press. It spread even more west to places like LA through other houses and word of mouth. The motivation and amount of activism being done in other cities quickly surpassed what was being done in Harlem. Smethurst, a novelist and author of the Black Arts Movement, literary nationalism in the 1960s and 70s, merely calls Harlem an incubator for the movement. Specifically in Chicago, the Black Arts Movement arrived through the Third World Press, a publishing house founded by Haki R. Madhubuti in 1967. The article published about the movement caught the attention of many young black artists and invited them to join the movement. According to 848, the Southside Community Arts Center was a safe haven for artists in Chicago and contributed greatly during the movement. Opened in 1940, it was one of 110 art centers built around Chicago. These centers were funded by the Roosevelt's Federal Art Project. The center was used as a place for displaying art, holding classes, and held many programs and functions. Luckily, my partner and I were able to get a tour of the Chicago Arts Building, led by Miss Natalie Battles.
Welcome to the Southside Community Arts Center. And then we're actually going to start right over here, above this beautiful piece here. This is our ancestral wall as well as our landmark status wall. And we are Chicago Landmark, working on a national landmark for two different reasons. One is because the Southside Community Arts Center is actually the first African American art center in the nation. It is 75 years old. And so these are our founding artists, and our lead founding artist is Dr. Margaret Burroughs. She's also the founder of the DuSable Museum of African American History, which is also the first of its kind in the nation, which started across the street. So if you guys look right out the window here, that gray stone with the red roof and the green trim, that was actually Dr. Burroughs' home, and she started the DuSable Museum in her basement.
The Wall of Respect was another way the black community demanded mainstream media to recognize their work and their value. The mural displayed several artists and leaders of the black arts movement and inspired many African Americans to continue to be artistic and stand up for what they believe in.
The Wall of Respect, which was kind of like the key early statement of the Black Arts Movement in Chicago, was it was a work of visual art, a mural, which then also kind of gathered around it other art forms. So musicians performed there, and poets read there, and there were political rallies, and so there were other kinds, and there were dramatic readings, plays. So other kinds of things went on there, but it kind of suggests a kind of centrality for the visual arts that's not necessarily present.
Today we can see this influence through many other murals around Chicago. Several other communities, such as Latino Hispanic community in Pilsen and the Asian community in Chinatown, have used murals to showcase their beliefs, values as well. We have seen the significance of murals grow after the Wall of Respect in 1967. The influence of the Black Arts Movement on modern society is clear through the 75th anniversary of the Southside Community Arts Center that was the very first establishment of the Black Arts Movement in the nation. As we know, African Americans were a minority and still are, but the black community was one of the first to stand up for themselves. Their courage and artistic way of showcasing black power has allowed several other communities to stand up as well. As African Americans were the most oppressed in the early and mid 20th century, they had to speak up for their rights. In the United States, we have seen and continue to witness the emergence of many powers. We have witnessed the LGBTQ community come out in the open and tell society that they are just like everyone else. We have witnessed the Latino and Hispanic community speak up for their rights to live in the land of the free. We have witnessed Those of Asian descent showcase their culture all over our nation, and we have witnessed them, just like many other communities, shut down stereotypes. We have witnessed and are still witnessing the influence of the Black Arts Movement in our nation. The Black Arts Movement allowed us to realize that we must all be united. In fact, this has been realized through the struggles that many communities have had to endure. The United States is currently going through a change that requires our citizens, residents, immigrants, and refugees to be united and stand up for each other.